with us this evening. We have Linda Murphy. Linda Murphy ran as the state superintendent of schools in 1994. I mentioned that only because she got 49.5% of the vote. You know, she almost made it. She was the education advisor in the governor's office and later the deputy commissioner for labor for workforce education and training. She's been involved in nearly all aspects of learning programs promulgated by the state and otherwise. Currently an education consultant and certified examiner for SOI, which is the structure of the Intellect Learning Abilities Test and component of Common Core, and an opponent of Common Core.
Right.
And with that, Linda Murphy. How you doing, Linda? Thank you for being on our show.
Great, thanks.
Well, what I said, does that strike a chord with you?
Well, I agree that much of what we have in public school systems is programming of the mind, of behavior, a very restricting type environment. However, we have pockets of innovative teachers, creative people, free thinkers who have the freedom to teach.
All right, let me stop you there because
Yes.
When I hear that, I say, fine, but in the school, in the institutions that we have now, it would seem that this would be heresy and people would be chastised, released, or whatever. How do they do that? How do they integrate that in the institutions that are so...
It depends on the administration where you are, because I've taught in different school systems where I did have freedom. And that is possible now. But where we are headed is not going to be possible because we have a restricted, rigid, and very regimented system coming into place with Common Core. Now, I'm not saying we haven't had this problem already to a great extent, but it's going to become much more so. And the dictates of what the system will entail will be driven by corporate determination, because this is really a workforce training program instead of an education plan. Instead of educating, the idea now, of course, is equal opportunity to learn and unlimited opportunities to be fully educated. Now, does that happen all the time and in every way? No, it isn't. But what we're headed to is more restrictive in that it will be education to a degree to read, write, and do math, but much more it's a training process that corporations will predetermine the type of worker skills they would like to see. So I'm very concerned about where we're headed. I'm concerned about where we are, but I'm more concerned about where we're going.
Boy, you know, I'm trying to wrap my... I hear it. You know what? When you say that, I can't help but thinking of the old communist black and white films we used to watch with the kids memorizing stuff, you know,
Yes.
for a particular reason. And maybe I'm being unfair. How do they determine what should be in the curriculum? Shouldn't we be developing minds and not skills at the young age?
Exactly. And this is what, you know, many teachers are becoming very upset at seeing what's coming ahead, because they've had the freedom to teach to a pretty good degree within their classroom. Now, I'm not saying everyone is creative and out of the box in their thinking, but there has been the opportunity for that within the system we've had to a pretty good degree.
Yeah.
What we're headed toward is such a regimented control of the skills that will be measured in what they're calling an accountability system. And as you just said, you don't really manage other people's lives well. There's not a way to do that. And that's really the end game here, is a behavioral, intellectual, and skill set to be molded in such a way that workers will form the skills that they want at the end of the process. In other words, it's an outcomes of having workers that are equal in skill and ability at the end of the process instead of an equal opportunity to learn at the beginning of a process.
God, that's worse. Really, that's worse than I thought it would be.
It is.
Actually worse than, because what they are expecting today, when you have these children 15 years from now, it's changed. How do they change? They change that every year. Say, oh, sorry, we really don't need you to know that. We need you to know this now. And do they hopscotch back and forth? I mean,
this is a whole new thing that's coming into place now. It won't be fully implemented until next year, when the testing is put in place through Measured Progress, which is the testing company that was just contracted by our State Department of Ed, State School Board, for $34.5 million, a 5-year contract for testing. But the testing is not just at the end of the year. It's at 4-week intervals, maybe 5-week intervals. I don't know if we'll even have flexibility on that, but it's frequent tests. Those are interval testing, but also a bank of items that teachers are supposed to integrate into the instruction to test really on a daily basis, to get measurement feedback about the student performance and change the instruction to bring up the areas where they're not performing well. And you'd think, well, that is academic, reading, writing, and math, but these are work skills that are integrated in to math so that a student wouldn't just calculate correctly, but that they would have a certain process of working the problem out. And it's the process they're measuring, not just can they calculate.
Ah, okay. All right. What if you only have 51% of the students in high school in the major cities, and including Tulsa is considered a major city, graduating, of what good is this program?
Well, very good question. If we're not successful with the system we have now, how do we know that the motivation, determination, the participation of the student, as we talked in our last show, how will that be there when it's not there now? I don't know. And it's not going to be engaging curriculum, not interesting curriculum, because in the reading, which we have now, the standards for English language arts, in that, it's requiring first graders, according to the standards that we've adopted in this system, first graders will get half of their reading material in instructional material, which is very industrial, informative, instructional material. First graders don't want to read that.
What do you mean by that?
Instead of literature, like Huckleberry Finn and stories about Johnny and the puppy dog running down to the creek and Susie
It's just
baking.
like socialism, it's double talk.
What are they going to do with Dr. Seuss? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's literature, and for half of the time you can have literature, but the other half
what's a first grader going to do with technical reading?
They're not going to be interested in reading, and I think there will be few readers that come out of that process.
Well, what's happening to those children, those non-graduates of high school that are dropping out in the sophomore, junior, and senior year that are not graduating? They're not getting a degree, and they're hitting the streets, and you know what they're doing. You know that some are getting jobs, some are getting labor jobs, some are going into illegal jobs, some are not doing anything, and some are staying home.
I don't see a good result with this plan at all. I do not see that improving this situation that we already have a problem with, dropouts in Tulsa public schools. 60% of the fourth graders in Tulsa public schools read below their grade level. 60% now. And so the Common Core system is supposed to be, the answer, but no. And it is not being created. It has not been designed by people who have been successful teaching in the classroom. That's not where it came from. It's come from corporate entities that have representatives in the panel that wrote the standards. People who are part of the National Governors Association has had the oversight of this through the organization called Achieve. And when you listen to what they say, they've got ideas about what they think they're integrating in that is a paradigm shift, a new way of presenting data and so forth. But as an educator that has taught children to read and seen children that didn't read well and finding out where their blocks are and helping them become successful, there's nothing in this program that appeals to me.
Well, I work for large corporations, and decisions made by upper management, large, for internal stuff, not talking about product marketing or whatever, are second only to the decisions that the government makes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're all horrible. None of them ever work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why this program when we had No Child Left Behind?
Right.
I mean, that was the end all, and no more problems. Let's get on to something else. What happened there?
Well,
Why did we look at No Child Left Behind and said, hey, numbnuts, this didn't work.
Right.
You think your next numbnut program is going to work? I mean,
it didn't work, and this is following on the same path. And what No Child Left Behind gave us across the nation was an accountability with students having to pass tests and take tests when they're not even prepared to take the test, like special ed students being required to be tested when they could not do that level of work.
Well, there was cheating involved. People were stealing.
All kinds
they were
of
selling
problems.
tests. I tell you, if I was in school, believe me, I'd be the number one. I'd be the bookie for tests. I really would. I'll be honest with you. Put me in jail. No, I hate this stuff. I'll do anything to screw up the system. I still am the same way.
Well, we know that the term.
Look what I did to 1170 KFAQ. They used to be a respected program.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, Linda.
No, I was going to say that, we know that the term unexpected consequences, unintended consequences, the law of unintended consequences. That's what happens with a lot of these big programs. In fact, any big top-down solution to improve education has failed. We have not had one that was successful. So we need to stop doing that, free people up, free up the creativity and the opportunity for people to actually inventively and innovatively in their own school district bring in things that have been successful. We do want children to read, write, do math, know some things about history, learn, like you said, interesting stories of history that are factual and not this rewritten history that has a political agenda behind it.
Emotional.
And that's where, even though we have problems, exactly, pulling on them emotionally to draw them in so they'll change their political view.
If it's
That's
emotional,
integrated.
it's not based off of thought. It's just
Right, and that's happening in
reaction.
some of the curriculum.
Linda,
That's true.
This is what troubles me about the whole thing, guys, is that you've got a central. It's just like the federal government trying to do something for states, and down
Exactly.
to right. You got this so-called brain trust that's running things.
Mm-hmm.
So if they want the masses to believe a certain thing, they're going to tell the teachers and the school administrators, this is what you're going to teach about what our political system is about and what science is about and what, all of these things are about. And it's coming from a top down and
Exactly.
it's so far away. It's in
Centralized
Washington.
power.
and you better tell them
That's
about the
the fear.
Holocaust. You got to read about it.
What really bothers me is like I listen. I've started businesses. Right now, I'm an owner in 3 businesses. All right, I drive myself nuts doing that. But I'd have to say that I don't think I can draw anything from what I've learned in school with my businesses. Everything I did is because I had a desire to do it or had an idea. Or I tried to help someone out, it didn't work, and I had to throw myself in, salvage it, or whatever the case may be. That been very hard roads. But I don't recall ever saying, well, I did this because I learned this in school. I don't seem to draw anything that I get from school. Why is that? Is it that I just forgotten and I really am drawing this information from school? Everything I learn on my own. And it seems that the schools don't allow us to do that, to use our own minds. I had to memorize all this crap just so I can get the diploma, get the hell out, and get a job.
Well, I do agree that can be a problem and is a problem in a lot of school situations. But there are teachers that are innovative and creative, and they realize that, they do not teach a student everything they need
Right.
to know about life. And they realize that the skills of reading, writing, and math are foundational skills that then you need to educate yourself. You need to be able to research and think. And when you come into a situation where you have cognitive dissonance, where you have something going one way and a completely contradictory information. You have to be able to discern, which way is correct, get more information, and make a decision. So there is some understanding. I think what we're getting, the good thing about this very bad system, Common Core, which is standards and testing that will be fully implemented statewide. We are seeing resistance in New York. There are thousands of teachers, parents, I will say people who have been sheeple, just following along. Everything's okay. I'm getting my paycheck. We're just teaching. We're just doing this routine thing. Finding out, hey, we're getting ready to be under the thumb of someone else outside of our state, outside of our district. We are going to have no control, and it's being changed in such a way that I'm going to have to be robotic and follow a scripted program.
Right.
And it's causing people who have been asleep to say, wait a minute, my freedom is being lost.
Right. Okay.
Well, gradually
It's a
it's
freedom
been
issue.
being lost anyway. But we are now, it's like I believe about Obama as president. Many people, where did the Tea Party come from? Where did the grassroots uprising saying our taxes, our lives now, our healthcare system, doctors are not going to be able to comply with this. We're losing our medicine. Why? Because of the centralized control that's being crunched down on us through the federal government. Now, this is what it is with Common Core, but in this case, we've got governors and corporations who are leading this, but it did not go through our state legislature, did not go through our local school boards. They have bought into a concept, which I say is the law of unintended consequences. They are not educators. They do not read the standards and really understand how that is changing what a teacher does in the classroom in a negative way, and they do not know what's in the test. Nobody's even seen the test. But I study what the people who write the test say their goals are, what they say they're doing, and they're trying to bring up what they call the achievement gap between minorities, certain classes, certain groups, certain demographics. But they're doing that in this way, by bringing the bottom up and making it harder abstractly for young children who are not developmentally ready, and they're bringing the top down, where the top level performers in academics, and so they're making a narrow passage here, and they think they can get everyone through that. They can't.
But if it doesn't incite the mind, those kids, especially in inner cities that are dropping out of school now because they're bored and
Right.
and the teachers are not qualified, and then you have this program, it's going to make it even more unqualified.
As when I was in school, what I have a problem with about education is you keep changing it. I used to get frustrated as a kid because every year there's something new. You re-engineer these kids, you re-engineer them, and it's like a warehouse factory that keeps changing the course of how they're going to manufacture the project from year to year. And this is what they're doing. They're screwing these kids up. They need to go back to basic learning and knowing why you're learning what you're learning. That's the biggest problem, because if you're a real smart kid, you want to know why you're learning this.
Well, and the kids have to be inspired, too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, see, they're not
Exactly.
being, you
So
can't
even if you're a
inspire
good,
people. Right.
even if you're a good student, you're brought down to the same level. It's because you're supposed to think the same way.
Right.
Yeah, a math teacher that's any good will teach you the formula, but he'll teach you why that formula is important, and then what it's answering, and how you can apply that formula to learn something. Not just, you put the brackets here and you multiply this by that, and you got this formula and you got to do it every day. It gets boring. I just say, hey, I'm out.
Who's it?
Doesn't make any sense to me.
The guy who owns Virgin Airlines and he's
Yeah,
the third
yeah.
richest, Richard.
Richard Branson.
Branson.
Right, right. Yeah, in fact, I heard him speak at when I was up in Minnesota, and they asked him about his education. He says, I never went to high school. He says, I couldn't because I was dyslexic. And he told stories. It was fascinating. It was heartwarming. But he understood the basics, but he was inspired to do things. And it seems like, what about our legislators? How come they're not saying, hey, not in my district?
They are definitely getting on the ball. We're getting a lot of
It did-
legislation.
but it
We've got a
did not go
Senate
to
bill.
them? It did not go through
It did not go through them. What they put into place was the wording, which the Common Core standards were not even written. So instead of a common core of knowledge, facts, and information, this was the system that was brought in before it was even written. So under Governor Henry, with Sandy Garrett was the state superintendent, the application was sent in, and in the application, you had to put in place the law that would allow this to come into place to compete to get the money. We didn't get the money, but they put it in place.
Yeah.
If
a vote was taken,
a big trick.
If a vote was taken Monday, how would our legislative
Well,
vote?
Monday, we would probably still have it, but by the time we get to the end of this session, I hope we don't. We've got a Senate bill that's been filed by Senator Fields, Osage County, Senate Bill 1146, which will stop the standards and the assessments. That's what we need to pass.
You get too busy doing standards and assessments, you can't really teach anybody anything.
Exactly.
You can't explain why that formula does what it does and why it does it and why you should use it and why it's so fascinating the way it works. You can't teach that kind of stuff if you have to go and get this test done and you got 6 tests to
Teachers are going to be busy staying
test
up with this process.
You're going to be an expert test
Kids
taker.
will be taking kale pectate all the time for nausea.
Giver, and that's all you're going to get.
Yes, and good teachers have been leaving, a lot of good teachers, because they can see they're not going to be able to interject the things they know, their subject knowledge, these things. You know, we have a lot of teachers that have been great teachers in a system that isn't always great, but they're scattered out there. We've got good people that we need to be able to leave them in place and get some more that can think like that.
Well,
teachers.
We have 1 minute ago. Dead Poets Society. That movie? Yes. I mean, that's the antithesis of what we're talking about, right?
Right.
The exact antithesis. Well, Linda, we have less than a minute to go. I want to thank you so much for being on our program. Would you please accept our invitation to return?
Sure, I'll do it.
Love to have you on the program.
Thank you,
again.
Joe.
There's so much to talk
You
about.
gotta fight this.
You know, it really is. You know, this is the end of today's broadcast, folks. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. This is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.